What's going on, everyone? Hey, how are you guys? Thank you guys so much for coming. Guys, give it up for Tech Thursday. Give it up. Guys, who here has been to Tech Thursday before? Raise your hand. Okay, I love it. Decent crew. Who here is here for the first time? Okay, I love it. Guys, thank you so much for coming. For those of you who are here for the first time, we do this every single week. So every week, we're here at the Pioneer at 4:30, every week on a different area of the tech and innovation space. So this week, we're talking about the productivity crisis in Canada. Next week, we partnered with the Black Chamber of Commerce to bring together Black leaders in tech. And then on the 27th, Artemis, Ashley is in the crowd, is hosting a panel on scaling leadership teams from seed to Series A. So how should you build your initial early stage leadership teams, and how should they grow over time? So that's going to be a fascinating conversation. You guys can follow our LinkedIn or Eventbrite to follow along on what we're posting. And we'll be here every Thursday till we die. This is really exciting, and this panel in particular today is really exciting to me. The productivity crisis in Canada. Last year, the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada, quote unquote, broke the glass on the productivity crisis, meaning we have falling rates of productivity, which means like a worker's output in terms of time of work, how much work they're able to get done in Canada has been falling, and we're now tied for second for the lowest in the G7, tied with Italy. So I didn't make a joke, you went there. So today we're going to be talking about why that's different, and I think it's really important to have events like this to bring the tech community together in formats like this, because I think this is really what can change our trajectory and our momentum as Canadians. As we sort of look at each other and say, like, what am I personally doing to, tell my company to invest in R&D, or am I going to take that big leap to start this company that challenges these massive incumbents in very, in industries that have very little competition. So I think we can all sort of prop each other up and say, this is going to be the new trajectory of Canada, the Canadian tech ecosystem in Calgary, but across Canada as well. So. Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. I think this is going to be an awesome panel. Let me thank the sponsors before I talk a little bit about what's cool about these folks that we're bringing up. So a big thank you to Neo Financial, our amazing title sponsors, and Jeff is the co-founder of Neo, so thank you. He's also the co-founder of SkipTheDishes, so shout out to SkipTheDishes, Float, Google Cloud, Confluent, and our fabulous team at Motive as well, and Huddle. So Motive has built an app for us where you can take questions if you're too shy to ask them. At the end, we'll do questions, but if you're too shy, you can scan the QR codes. There's a few around. And if you scan those, you can ask your questions there, either as yourself or anonymously, so even fewer people can judge you. Cool. Today, we have about a 45-minute panel, followed by 15 minutes of audience Q&A, and then we got this place all night. So feel free to stick around and mingle and meet some cool folks. When I looked today, right before this event, at who here was interested in connections, there's 295 RSVPs for this event, and 164 people asked to be introduced, which is overwhelming, and I haven't built an AI software to do that yet. So this is on you to meet who you're looking for, so ask them questions. But today we have an awesome panel. Ruhee is moderating the panel. She's at the Calgary Chamber and an expert in this field. Mike is the new interim CEO of Alberta Innovates. So it'll be awesome to hear his new perspective on where he wants to take Alberta Innovates. Janak just moved from being the chief of AI at the federal government to become the new deputy minister of innovation for the government of Alberta. So I'm fascinated to hear your vision for the future of this province and this ecosystem. And Jeff, I mentioned your former accolades, but just started Build Canada, which if you haven't checked that out yet, it's a coalition of Canadian tech founders writing memos as policy advice for if the government of Canada can take it on, implement it, or maybe you can start a business based on what they're talking about. So this Build Canada, really fascinating, folks like Toby Lukey and the CEO of Well Simple. So that's it. That's it for me. Maybe a warm welcome to the panelists. I'll call them all up. Guys, come on up. Thank you so much.
Wow, full house. Thank you all so much for joining us, and especially in the cold. We were talking about how excited we are for this conversation, and really thrilled that all of you are here to join as well. So as you heard, we'll do audience Q&A at the end too, so I'll make sure we have lots of time for audience Q&A. But to start off, we'll dive into what the heck productivity is and why you think about it every day. And we'll start with you, Mike.
I knew I shouldn't have sat beside you because all of a sudden I thought she's going to ask me to speak first. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to see so many friendly faces. I'm assuming you're friendly faces. So productivity, I mean, I'll say that, as I thought about productivity in terms of coming here today, I think often we misinterpret productivity to be about people working harder and longer as a way to drive the economy. Yet we know on many levels productivity is about creating opportunities for success and driving the economy through new technologies, through ways of moving industries forward, in ways of moving new initiatives that are not yet industries forward. And so when I think about it in the context of the agency that I'm now trying to get to know and nudge along, I think about the role of agencies like Alberta Innovates, who have to contribute to the ability to move things along in new ways, and not just think that it's all about effort, because there is this misperception that productivity is all about effort.
Well, in fact, theoretically, it should be less effort if we get it right. And Jeff, maybe if you want to tell us about how some of the work that you're doing is actually making it easier, and how you think about productivity in your day-to-day.
Yeah, thanks, Ruhee. First of all, it's incredible to see what Tech Thursdays has become. I mean, this is just awesome, and super humbled that everyone came out tonight, so I really appreciate it. Apologies if my voice is a bit hoarse. I thought I used to have a good immune system, but it turns out I just didn't have 2 kids in daycare. Yes. But I was just going to start by saying everyone needs to work harder, but I feel like that's probably not a good way to start. No, it's totally right. Like, it's not about working harder, and I think it's actually just more about value creation. Productivity is really, really simple. It's just really GDP per hour worked. So how much value are you creating for every hour that you work? And you can really change that number by creating more value, so create more valuable products or services, and produce them more efficiently. So I think in a tech company, that's kind of like the name of the game. Obviously, in the beginning, productivity is awful because you're making huge investments. And I think we'll get into kind of what we're doing later, but NEO's mission is really to make banking user-friendly. It's very simple. And we do that really by providing low-cost, high-yield banking products that save people time and money. And the measurement of how we do that is really around, how much revenue are we generating per employee that we have? And then as you scale the business, you start seeing those numbers improve dramatically. For context, even at NEO, it's improved over 100x over the last couple of years. But I think that we've got a huge opportunity in Canada. It's one of the richest nations in terms of natural resources, educated population, internet usage, mobile phone penetration. And I think what we're going to get into today, we're really excited to talk about, is just really what can we do to move the needle. And I think if we do a good job here today, it's actually going to give everyone even more questions maybe to think about, and really how to think about the problem. And I think it's extremely relevant given just what's going on with the US and also with the political election coming up. So really looking forward to it.
You're just showing off with your voice. So I apologize. I don't usually sound this sexy, but I will hopefully be back to my usual programming in a week or two. But no, I mean, I look at productivity from the public service side, similar to what Mike and Jeff said. We have to reduce barriers across the board. if you are running through layers and layers of fly tape or duct tape or whatever those guys on YouTube do, they stretch the tape between the poles and run between it, if you've seen that. That's what it feels like often. And I've started 4 businesses, and I've run them. I've run them successfully before I moved to Alberta. And I came at it from the standpoint of just learning as I went, and I got the shit kicked out of me. And through the learning path, and it wasn't always fun. It was always interesting, but there's many aspects of it that just do not allow uninformed people to go out and start a business and be productive and be profitable. And a lot of those are in my domain, in the public service, which is the kind of services that we put out. And I'd like to get to the point where in Alberta, because a lot of this falls under my portfolio, getting any government service is as easy as signing up for a Neo product, right? I could get or SkipTheDishes, right? Like, why can I get food to my house, delivered, cooked, hot, tasty, in like 15 minutes, and it takes me 110 days to register my mortgage? I moved here in November, and I still don't own my house technically because it hasn't gone through the registries yet. So, there's a lot of things where we have to make it that simple. And, I look at it in one more lens. I look at it internally where, I'm looking heavily at AI as a means of increasing the productivity of public servants. And interestingly enough, that will do nothing for the GDP, because the more productive I make public service, where they're not outputting to the GDP, it technically lowers it, because we'll do things faster, but they won't contribute more to the economy necessarily. But what it will do, jokes aside, is it will fundamentally make everything going on in the private sector, hopefully a lot easier. And the idea of being an entrepreneur, de-risked, accessing programs in Mike's organization, all those things, it should just be seamless. And if we want to be competitive, that's the way we have to be.
Pacing Italy, as you mentioned, without the quality of pasta, so not quite leveling up there, but have fallen from 6th to 18th in the OECD. So even when we look at a bigger pool where Canada's not hitting above its weight. And a quick plug for the Chamber, we released a report on Monday talking about the importance of productivity and actually polled Canadians, and 78% of Canadians are concerned about productivity, which was quite shocking for us. And so, Jeff, I'll come to you first on this one, but why are we so bad at productivity? Why are we in this crisis situation to the point that Canadians are that concerned?
Yeah, and I think it's maybe to reframe the question a little bit, because I think there's a lot of talk about like how bad we are, and there's like people are not proud as they used to be about being Canadian. So I think a little bit of optimism might not be a bad thing, because I think the good thing about kind of being in the dumps is that you actually have a lot of room to go up. And it's actually really exciting to be on the upswing. And we're talking about value creation in the magnitude of trillions of dollars that we have the opportunity to experience. Like, that's the opportunity that we have in front of us. Currently, we're sitting at about 50% of the productivity of the US. 50% right now. I think Alberta is the only province, maybe Saskatchewan too, that is currently above the average in the US. And if you look at Ontario, they're the equivalent of Alabama in terms of productivity. So tons of opportunity to go up, right? It'd actually be trickier if we were already way, way above, and then you had to figure out, well, how do you improve on that? That's very, very difficult. So that's the good news. How does it manifest? How does it
I appreciate the optimism.
Thanks. So I think the reasons, and there's really no one thing, and that's actually kind of the good thing and maybe the bad thing. The good thing is that there's actually so many different things that we can do to improve it, but the bad thing is that you can't just do one thing and sit back. You can't like snap your fingers and all of a sudden we're going to improve it. It's going to have to be really across the spectrum of, I think there's a culture component, there's a regulatory component, policy component, tax, incentives, I'm probably missing some. You really have to attack all of them. And then you have to also think about the rate of change of these relative to a changing world as well. Because even if we incrementally improve these, the rest of the world is also improving them too. So if we improve it at the same rate as the rest of the world, we actually will stand still. So that's another important thing that we want to, everyone in Canada start thinking about is our position in the world and where do we want to really be in it. And that means if we want to have more of a position of preeminence, we need to accelerate the improvement relative to everyone else. And that's going to require quite a bit of sweeping changes across the board.
Let's talk about a couple of those sweeping changes. Janak, you alluded to AI earlier, and while there's no silver bullet, that is top of mind for a lot of ours, for a lot of organizations, and for the future of where we're headed. So, what's your take on how AI might boost productivity? Is there an opportunity for Canada to have a competitive advantage and actually get further ahead on this? And how do we make sure we get that right?
Well, I'll give you two very different answers on that. The first one is, folks who've been watching the news would have seen a lot of the work that my minister's been doing on the AI data centers, and there's just such an opportunity for that here in Alberta. We have a generational opportunity to latch on and make this the destination of choice, if not in North America, even in the Western Hemisphere, to be the best place in the zone to set up these data centers and to scale up. And we have a lot going for us. We've got the will, the resources, and the know-how. And so I look at that as being, there's something tremendously exciting about that we can sort of be the home that enables that. The application of it is where I spend as much or more time thinking about, frankly. And I was thinking about how do we increase our productivity inside the public service. I was starting to think about it in like 1s and 2s and 10%. Oh, maybe we could get a little bit more going here and there. But then when I really spent a lot of time over these last months and over the last year, and then I come in and look at some of our government challenges. Right now it takes 8.2 months to do our average procurement. So if I want to buy something to respond to a pressure, it takes 8.2 months. I think we can get it down to 7 days. That's not 10% faster, that's a whole lot faster. And there's no reason, and the only reason I say 7 days is because it's really 7 hours probably, but I just didn't want to get attacked in the parking lot. So no, I think we can identify problems, and then if we understand, and this is what we're not that good at in government and maybe beyond, but if we can understand and map out the steps that we take, we are now at the level with AI that we can automate those steps. We can be very, very diligent with building AI agents that will take us from start A to posting an RFP, again, within a day. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means a few things. First of all, the public service is the largest purchaser in Canada, and yet we buy very little Canada. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to respond to 1,000 bids, and so we sort of bid narrowly. And the usual suspects win most of the bids. We know this is a problem. I'm not kind of sharing anything outside of school. But if we were to leverage these technologies, we could not only bid faster, we could enable a lot more Canada to bid on the kinds of things that we're interested in, and we could start to actually create that circular economy here that we're looking for, and that will go a long way as well. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunities inside the public service that we can utilize this, and we have an event, the plug on March 19th. I'll be back at Platform Calgary showing you how we do this. So we're taking it really seriously. We're building our first teams, and this is going to be central to how we make a much more responsive public service.
What do you think is going to be the biggest hurdle in getting to that point?
Well, it's not what everyone typically goes for on AI. I would say the biggest hurdle is it takes, in my experience and the people I know, somewhere between 3 to 4 months of continuous use of these tools to actually get the click, the aha moment. And so a lot of people look at them and they'll spend a day or two or a week and they're like, I just don't get it. I don't see it. It's cool, I guess, but it's not really helping me. So it's going to be sort of suspending disbelief that these things are possible until you get past that trough of disillusionment and you get to the aha moment. But the second biggest thing is we'll need to give people time. The second biggest thing is almost nothing. This is going to sound horrible. I'm going to see the quote in the paper tomorrow. I'm going to get a call. Almost nothing, generally speaking, not about the Alberta government, is as well documented as it should be. And so you want AI to help you. Well, all the information on how everything works is right here. It's corporate knowledge, tribal knowledge, tacit knowledge, whatever you want to call it. So if you can start to really reflect on how people do things, AI is your partner. If you don't know, if it's not written down and you can't map it, it will never help you. So we have a lot of processes. We need to not only map how they work today, we have to rethink them. And if we do that, then the sky's the limit.
Well, and I think too that it's not just the Alberta government, it's
Not at all.
like startups, right? It's
Not
all over the place. We really don't document things, especially the exciting things, as much as we could. I want to talk a little bit about R&D, and Mike, I'll come to you on this one, but Canada has lagged our peers on R&D, and I think that's played into our productivity as well, and where we're at. And so curious on your take of why that's been, and where you see the big opportunities for R&D moving forward, really from all sizes and sectors.
Well, there's a recent study that came out of Britain just in 2024 that really showed very clearly the link between R&D and productivity. And so there's no question that there is a challenge that we face when we are not focused on the innovation side of things to help drive R&D. And so when you look at our expenditure on R&D, which is about 1.7% of our GDP, and you compare that to the US, compare that to other countries, I think we compare to Estonia, if I'm not mistaken. And so, you know, the question then is the why behind it, obviously. And so, you know, one of the things that I guess I'll sort of go back to not only my day job now, but my former day job as a university president. One of the things that was really challenging to see when we tried to work with industry was a lack of focus on R&D. And so when I came to Alberta Innovates and really started to understand the opportunities that we explore through our entities like Innotech and CFR and the work that we do, there's no question the appetite for innovation is there, but the infrastructure to support is really challenged in Canada. I did my PhD down in the US a long time ago. I won't tell you what year, but it was well before the 2000s, let's just say. And I did it at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And there was, even in those days, something called the Research Triangle Park. And it was called the Silicon Valley of the eastern part of the US. And so even in those days, which were 30 plus years ago, the interconnection between universities and industry and the collaboration that took place was really significant. In our context in Canada, that doesn't exist at the same level. And so this is one of the challenges, and one of the things that I've talked to a lot of folks about in the last 7 months as I've met many people in Calgary and Edmonton and Red Deer and Lethbridge, and next week I'm in Grand Prairie, is how do we develop a more collaborative approach to the work that we do so that we can unlock the opportunity that R&D provides and create a pathway for more interest and sort of engagement in this context. And so when I look at what we've tried to do at Alberta Innovates, we have many vehicles to support startups and to support the work that's needed to really try and move the dial. But one of the things I learned is we're not as collaborative as we should be. And so even Alberta Innovates, that is supposed to be the sort of cornerstone of innovation in the province, has not done as good a job in developing a collaborative model from an innovations perspective. So one of our aspirations, to be honest, going forward, is to develop a much more collaborative approach to the ecosystem so that we can foster the kind of environment that we need to support research and development in the country and really move the dial, right? And I think that the sky's the limit. I agree. When you're where we are, there's lots of room for improvement, and that's a great thing. And I think positivity is also a very important piece of the puzzle. So, of course, when we look to the news, it's hard to be optimistic when we see what's going on, within the context of the new U.S. administration, etc. The way to flip that around is to say, what opportunities does this provide? And I think it provides a tremendous number of opportunities in terms of looking at a more collaborative model. I don't know if you're next. Yeah.
One of the things that you raised, Jeff, is around entrepreneurship and the spirit of entrepreneurship. Canada has 100,000 fewer entrepreneurs than we did 20 years ago. And do you think it's possible to get the culture of entrepreneurship back, that risk-taking? How do we do it? And what will it look like if we get it right?
Yeah, that's the trillion-dollar question. And I think there's, it's multifaceted again. And I think that even when Mike's talking about R&D, so much of this question is really around a culture around risk-taking. And I think that when it comes to entrepreneurship, and again, in the beginning of entrepreneurship, you're really investing your time and energy and a little bit of capital into something that you think can help people. But you don't know if it's going to pay off or not. You really are uncertain. I remember early days of Skip, we're literally sleeping. I've slept in my car, I've slept on every friend's house in Western Canada on the floor. I used to have a little roll-up mattress I would carry around with me. And, a lot of people are not willing to do that. It requires a lot of sacrifice. And if you don't have a culture that promotes risk-taking, because a lot of those benefits won't really manifest until much later on. So a lot of the time and energy and money you're putting in, you don't know when they're going to materialize. And so you have to tolerate a period of time of uncertainty and risk. And I think, coming back to culture, Canada has really been a country that has prioritized stability over innovation and risk-taking. And it's not to say that we don't have any innovation risk-taking. Obviously, like the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, is from Canada. We have tons of incredible innovations that come from Canada. But not to the extent that our neighbors have. And again, it's important to remember that we're in a global competition for both talent and capital. And so part of it is pointing the finger back at us and saying, okay, how can we encourage people to take more risks? And I think that then comes to, okay, well, what are we doing? And actually, Michael Litt, who's the founder of a tech company in Waterloo called Vidyard, he just released a memo at Build Canada. And it's about how are we celebrating our inventors, our builders, our risk takers. I remember when I was a kid, we used to have heritage minutes, but they stuck with me. And that then shows people, because a lot of people probably saw those and they say, wow, this is, Canada created this. So I think we need to really start, regardless of whether or not someone succeeds, in celebrating the people who are going and getting after it. And anyone who started a company will tell you that whether they succeeded or failed, they learned more than they ever had. And I think there's this perception that if you don't succeed, you're a failure. And I know that we've got hundreds of employees at NEO, and if I say anyone that has taken that risk and started their own company, that's very, very attractive to hire someone who's put themselves out there like that. So I think that for anyone who's thinking about starting a company, it is not a binary success failure. You're almost always going to succeed if your measurement of success is how can I learn as much as I can in the shortest amount of time. So I think reframing it a little bit and celebrating those risk takers, and then also creating a new tolerance for risk around investment. I think those are really important aspects that we need to change if we want to turn around entrepreneurship and really create the next Google in Canada or the next Meta or whatever company. We have a real opportunity to do that, I think.
Awesome, thanks. I'll open it up to all of you. You've all expressed some level of optimism, which I find quite encouraging. what are we doing well?
We are having this conversation. Is that necessary? I think we have everything we need, I think, to not only keep up with, but outpace. I think we in many ways know that. So I think we're not ignorant of the opportunities in front of us. I think we see them. I think, this isn't directly answering your question, but I think if we can amplify, some of the top companies here in Canada, clearly we know how to do it. Clearly we've got the knowledge here. I think that again, I don't want to focus on problems, but clearly people know how to execute. But there's this problem, that when you get to a certain level, we stop celebrating you. Right? We're like, yeah, those guys, those Shopify guys, or those Neo guys, or whatever, right? But it's like we want to talk about people to a certain level, and then after a certain level, we sort of stop celebrating those things as being Canadian institutions, Canadian cornerstones. And so we do know how to do it, but we just don't know how to celebrate it, I think, as much as we can. And so then there's not so we need a stronger pull. We need a bigger funnel. We need more people saying, it's going to be shitty. I'm going to sleep in my car. I've done that too. We're going to have, this is going to be tough. But people will be like, hey, fuck yeah, you're an entrepreneur. Look at what you're doing. You're really trying. You're the one who's going to, you're going to be the next one, or you're going to learn a lot, but I support you either way. When I started a couple of businesses, I really thought in my network, people would sort of get behind me and be like, oh, that's a really good idea. How can I help? This was back in the 10s, but 2010, 11, 12, whatever. But it was like crickets. It was so hard to get even like friends and family to be excited about, what I was trying to do and start up and things like that. And it was kind of eye-opening about that we just don't see that as a merit. We just don't look at that risk-taking aspect as being something that we really celebrate as much as we should. So I think we know how to do it. I think we have all of the pieces of the puzzle. There's certainly things that we need better, but we need to align the story that this matters. If we don't align the story, we're not going to align the funding, we're not going to get the programs, we're not going to get the supports, we're not going to get the focus to really take this on in a big way. So what I'm excited about is that if we can get the story straight, I know we can do it, and I know that we can exceed, because I see it happening, in Calgary and across Canada. And we just need to learn that. We just need to strengthen that muscle, and get to celebrating these as these people who take these risks as being the heroes of the society that we want to go forward with. And I have my phone on my lap, by the way, of the top Canadian values by a Canadian poll. And at the top at the top is rights and freedoms, and then respect for others, and then kindness, multiculturalism, and social equality, tolerance, honesty, going down the list. Those are all great things, but at the bottom we have hard work and work ethic at 2.2%. That's what we associate as Canadian values. It's just above other at 2.1, and unsure at 2%. And so, why don't we flip the narrative? Why don't we say we're so proud of the Canadian entrepreneurs, and get that to be the narrative? And I know people in Calgary that can come to these events, you guys are incredibly proud of the scene here, and you should be, but Canada has to get a lot more proud of the things that we're doing. We have to start to support each other and grow that a little bit better. And I know that, I know that you're doing it. I think there's more that I can do. I think there's more that public service across Canada can do, not just with programming, but let's get the communications right. Let's really tell people, we're here for this. This matters, and this is going to be our thing. And in some ways, it's self-fulfilling, but that's the way it works, whether you're trying to take on a difficult physical challenge, or, you tell people, I'm going to do this thing, this is what I'm about, and then it becomes your identity.
So one of the other ways I think about it, in addition to how Janak has positioned this, is really more at a macro level. What has Alberta done well that we can celebrate, but also that we can build upon? And so when we look at what's happened over the last number of years in terms of in-migration to Alberta, when we look at cost of living in Alberta compared to the Torontos and the Vancouvers, etc., this is an attractive place for young people and people in general to come to or stay in. And I was talking to somebody at Platform Calgary dinner the other night who's here this evening, and he was telling me that his son and daughter-in-law are moving back from Toronto and how excited he is. But how much of an indicator he saw this to be in terms of where Alberta is at in relation to being able to keep as well as attract people into the province. And I think we really need to recognize that as a tremendous advantage, but of course then we have to build upon it. The things that we've done well in Alberta in terms of creating the kind of energy that I see here tonight is a big part of that. Not long after I started in my new position last July, I had a conversation with the then also pretty new CEO of Mars, and I shouldn't tell you what she told me because then she may get in trouble back in Toronto, but she said to me, you know, Mike, I actually come to Calgary to get a fix of that from the energy that exists in this city. And she said, don't tell all the people back in Toronto that that's how I feel. But it was a real statement from her as to what's going on in this city and what's going on in this province. And so I think part of the what's good is very much about this province and where the cities like Calgary are at. But then we have to, as this goes then to Janak's point, we really have to put energy into building upon this. We have to put our resources in places that matter and enable those that are moving through startups to have the kind of funding available to move to scale up. There's a lot of important things to be done, and that wasn't the question, so I won't go into it. But certainly I think the optimism that exists in this province is something to celebrate. And I will tell you, I moved here 25 years ago from Manitoba. And when I moved here, one of the things that I was struck by, like almost immediately when I was a dean at the University of Alberta, was the level of optimism and ingenuity that I saw across the campus of the University of Alberta. And I won't talk about the campus I had come from because I don't want to denigrate my alma mater, who might have been the University of Manitoba. But I did really have this sense that, wow, this province has something about it that is very different than what I've experienced. And I continue to see that 25 years later. Does it mean that we've done everything right? No, obviously we've got a lot of work to do, but I think the provincial and city context here is something that we should recognize as a benefit and an opportunity and build upon it.
I appreciate that, and we're, again, the optimism does come through, and I think some of these challenges are systemic. And curious, Jeff, if you can talk a little bit about, as folks go away at the end of our conversation, what everyone can do from a productivity perspective. Some of it comes down to public policy, which we'll get to, but as folks are going on with their day-to-day, how do we integrate this how do we integrate this productivity challenge and addressing it into really everything that we do so that we actually can get ahead?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of wrap things up, is really, and I think it's important to frame this in a way that it's not necessarily good or bad always about like, hey, more productivity is good, less productivity is bad, because there's trade-offs. And I think that even when you look at Canada compared to the US, we actually outperform the US up to about 70% of income, in terms of amount of income per capita per person. So we actually have, but then as soon as you get to 70%, the US just takes away, like runs away with. So they have more wealthy, it's more competition, it's more dynamic of the market. But Canada is actually more egalitarian, it's more distributed. And there's pros and cons of both of those models. And so I don't want this to be a discussion of like, okay, well, we have to be more productive or else we're all just failures. Because maybe, to Janak's point around our values, maybe as a country, we just don't want to be as dynamic and competitive, and we'd rather actually, have other things. That's okay. I think that's it's not for us to judge what people want or what we want. But I think it's important to identify and ask the question of what do we want as a nation, really? Because there is trade-offs in terms of as GDP per capita rises, living standards rise as well. So we can either accept a lower standard and a lower GDP per capita, again, most countries do actually, or we can say, no, we want to increase this. We want our kids to have a higher standard of living than we did. And that's the decision I think we need to make as a society that I don't know if we've fully made yet. And what that really means is if we say, and I think everyone, you're here because you're interested in this, and so you're already taking the first right step, is trying to understand what are the right questions to ask, how should I even think about the problem? And it's not for us to tell people how you should be thinking about it. It's really around, if we want to change it, then it's really saying we need to then get a government in power, regardless of which government it is, and demand and have a mandate to do the things that align with what we want and align with our values. And I think that means, again, it cuts across culture, regulatory, like, how many people here know how many regulators there are in Canada? Just take a guess. Too many. There's over 600 regulators in Canada. Even if we had kept the same productivity per capita since 2015, but we had actually eliminated the interprovincial trade barriers, we actually would have kept up with the US. That would have been an extra $250 billion of GDP annually if we just remove interprovincial trade barriers and all the overlapping regulators. And then on top of that, we could increase productivity again. So I think the government's only going to do what we demand that they do. And regardless of who it is, it doesn't matter if it's left, center, right, we just need to say what we want and then hold them accountable to that. So I think that to me is the biggest takeaway, and this is kind of what I've taken away, this is why we started Build Canada, is to put ideas out there that we believe that can increase the prosperity of society here in Canada. And they're from all across the spectrum. They're from people on the left and the center and the right. And to have these ideas be debated on the merit of the idea, and if only one, we're releasing one memo per week, if only one of those ideas gets brought into policy by whatever government it is, we'll consider that a win, because it only takes really like one of these ideas to really move the needle. Interprovincial trade is an example. And then we can start getting the dominoes on the other ones. Start changing the culture, start changing the regulatory scheme. So that's kind of how I think about it. I'm curious to hear what Janak and Mike think, though.
Well, I'll reflect on two things. I agree with you. I think that it goes beyond the political side, although the pieces you're putting forward are key. You're not going to get change unless you tell that story. But what is the story we're trying to tell for Canada for the next generation? And I personally feel that we've sort of lost the story that we're attempting to tell. And without that unifying vision, you are not going to be able to mobilize the policies and the plans and the money and the programs and the R&D unless you can sort of figure out that story. And so I think we have a lot of energy in this country, but I think that we're a lot of vectors pointing in a lot of directions right now. And when you add them all up together, they seem to point to not very anywhere clear. So I would say that, you know, on top of that, I think that there's a social narrative that we need. You know, so I'm excited to see, you know, how that evolves. Yeah, I don't know if I have much more to add to what you said, Jeff, so pass it to Mike.
So the only thing I'll add is having traveled to a few different countries that are doing innovation quite well. Ireland, Israel, Germany. One of the things that I've been struck by each time I've spent time visiting and spending time within the various contexts of the ecosystem is in the countries that are successful, the level of integration, and so this really speaks to your point, Jeff, the extent to which there's a sense of cohesion between the government, industry, post-secondary and research institutions, etc. And so when you go into those countries and you see the kind of alignment that exists, you then start to understand why they are able to drive innovation so effectively in a way that is cross-cutting and countrywide. And so when I spent time in Germany at one point, and spent time with universities that were aligned with industry, the sort of connectivity between the entities was unbelievable, and it filtered through all different levels of the organization, all the way down to students having very concrete internships with industry. I mean, just the whole gamut. And so this sense of alignment and integration, I think, is a challenge for us in Canada, in part because of our Constitution and trying to create a sense of cohesion across the country. But it's far more feasible in a province, right? We have our own destiny to pursue from a provincial standpoint that is not challenged by the nature of our governance. And so, Jeff's point about challenging government is important, but I would argue that challenging all of us to find better alignment across the context within which we work is part of the opportunity, right? And we were at an IP a session on IP yesterday that was fantastic. And one of the things that was talked about a lot was the extent to which Canada is really falling down when it comes to our pursuit of controlling our own IP. And part of the solution that was articulated was, again, alignment and collaboration, coming up with a system that ensures that we collectively, writ large, see IP not as the panacea, the only solution, but as one of the solutions. And when you look at IP in other countries that are successful, they're doing far better than we are. And so this notion of alignment, I think, is really important.
Thank you so much. Okay, I have a lot more questions, which means all of you probably have a lot more questions. So we'll open it up to the floor. I don't know, do we have a roaming mic?
Yeah.
Do you want this one?
Perfect. Ian, I'm going to you. I saw your
Hi, you talked a lot about government, startups. If you have a message for executives in corporations here in the city and across the country, what's your message? What would you want them to hear? And what's your ask in the shift in the corporate organizations that are out there?
Yeah, I think that one of the interesting questions about GDP per capita being stagnant or declining is who benefits from that happening? And the answer is I don't know for sure, but who benefits from the status quo being maintained is maybe the better way to ask. And so I'd say that Canada has a very concentrated oligopolic market, and very few companies, very little competition. That's what we prioritized in banking, telecom, far more than most OECD countries. And I think that for the executives of a lot of these companies, I can understand that it's probably difficult to get the buy-in from their shareholder base to make large investments in productivity enhancing technologies. Like, it's more work. It's a lot easier to say, we're just going to continue to make these incremental changes, like it's working, we're doing okay, you're getting your dividend. But then to go to your base, whether that be a telecom, grocer, a bank, and say, we're actually going to cut the dividend, and we're going to then take all that and then plow it into productivity enhancement investments, that's more work, that's more risk as an executive. So I think that would be the ask, and I think that all Canadians would benefit from that. I don't know if they have the stomach for it, because I think life is just too good for them right now.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things that we've seen at Alberta Innovates when it comes to, in particular, the sort of clean tech energy sector, is a transition away from R&D from a company perspective and looking at different ways to facilitate R&D. And so very much to Jeff's point, part of the challenge you have in doing that is that it then becomes more and more difficult to see how we can drive innovation by supporting those companies that are trying to move up the ladder and need the access to capital that's very challenging to come by. So again, back to my Platform Calgary dinner experience, I have to I don't think Terry's here, so I should give him full credit for inviting me to dinner the other night. I was speaking to a couple of people in the financial services sector about this very question. And one of the things that I was positively struck by was the statement by the two different individuals I spoke to about their growing understanding of their responsibility to do this. And so there is a responsibility piece to this that is something that we do have to challenge our industry, corporate world to think about, because they're also citizens of Calgary. They're also citizens of Canada. And so part of I think the goal for all of us is to encourage that context, to think about the future and the extent to which their resources can help contribute to that future. And so in the same way we have to challenge our governments, I think we have to challenge our corporations to think about the future as it relates to how to change the dial, as we said.
And I look at it from a very tech-centric standpoint. Sorry. And there's not much of a moat left anymore with the introduction of AI. With what used to be the large ERP companies, the large CRM companies, the large SaaS companies, your moat's gone. What you're going to be able to see productive teams of 10s coming out is going to be 10s to 100 times more than you could do 10 years ago. And I would say two things. First of all, respond. And second of all, I would say to those companies, don't let the oligopolies keep winning, right? We have an opportunity, if you're an entrepreneur, to take on the market in a way that you never have before. Realize that this is a legitimate change, and step up. And I'll say from my standpoint, start bidding, start competing, get out there and throw your hat in the ring. And I'll be there in Alberta to meet you in the middle with everything we're doing to make procurement much more streamlined and easy. But that also means the Canadian companies need to stand up. And one of the things that I was disappointed with when I lived in Ottawa is that I knew some of the best companies in Ottawa, and they just said, I don't bid. I don't bid on government contracts. I don't bid on public service. I don't want to compete. My customers are United States only, because the US knows how to buy things. Canada doesn't know how to buy things. So I think we need to get a lot smarter at that, but I also, I'm hoping industry steps up in Canada and these Canadian companies step forward. And whatever happens on the tariff thing, which is not my file, but we're all watching it very closely, I think it's fostering the right conversations to be having in 2025. And, I don't think anyone's credibly looked at the interprovincial trade thing as much as we have in the last 3 weeks, as an example. And there's a lot more other things like that as well. So whether this was a scare or whether these tariffs are going to come in force, we don't know. We'll have to see what happens with the administration in the States. But act accordingly. Act like it was. Let's get these things figured out now. There's no more time to wait. Don't leave it. If all this goes away and we forget about it, don't leave it 10 years. Diversify your markets. Figure out how to trade. Figure out how to compete, and celebrate the ones that do.
Thank you.
Thanks. So many things resonate so well right now. So I'm Sean Gray with the VP. I'm a VP for Prairies PropTech Association, so we represent the technology firms that are driving productivity and profitability in the residential construction sector. Tying a couple things and observation, but also a question. And sorry, Janak, this might go to you, and I'm sorry if you have to answer this one. Yeah. Well, but more maybe make an observation. So, we asked, why are we so bad at productivity, and, how do we get ahead? And, Jeff said, kind of framed it around, well, when you're at the bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. And, when we look at, Janak, you kind of said, hey, you're thinking about where can you do work in 1% effort, or, move the needle if you just do a 1% increment. When we look at the, where to start is sometimes the hardest part with these things. And an observation we're seeing is there's lots of things being done in all different areas. And I'll frame this around the context of the construction sector, one of the lowest productive sectors with the highest GDP contribution to the Canadian economy. Yet I'm seeing so many initiatives and programs for all other different types of sectors. So when I look at this, I go, well, if we're looking for a place where you really have at the lowest of the low and have the 1% incremental improvement will have the most amount of impact factor. Are we doing enough to support that arena where it is the bottom of the bottom, where 1% can do the most? But also I'll frame it around going, when we say why are we so bad and why are we so behind, the programs that we see are consistently catered to the large major corporations for reasons obvious, but what we see out of them is just incremental movements. Whereas, framing around the construction sector, residential construction sector, 150,000 businesses exist that are not those major mega corporations. So when we keep producing initiatives and pumping money into the, helping the big mega corps, move incrementally forward, do you think a little shift needs to happen in terms of where we are focusing that attention? Like there's a major gap, it appears. There's nowhere room but up, and that 1% of increment in that arena can have obviously major ramifications. So does that, how does that resonate with the audience or with the panel here?
I think that I'm going to pass this to my colleague, but very quickly I'm going to say, I think when we look at the making of things, North America has deprioritized the making of things for the last couple of decades, and I think it's coming back. And it's certainly coming back in the States when you read their policy pieces. They want to be good at making things. It's not just the knowledge economy, it's the full economy. And so I think we need to have those conversations in Canada as well.
I think it's a great example that you brought up. Construction, if construction had actually just maintained its productivity since 2015, because it's such a big sector, we actually would have tripled our GDP per capita growth since then. That's the equivalent of putting roughly $2,000 back into every living Canadian's pockets every year. So the question is, okay, well, why is it slowing down? Like, why isn't it getting done? And I think any homeowners or builders here will have experienced it, is that it's effing hard to get through all the paperwork. Like, why is it so damn difficult? Titles, inspections, all these different, all the different levels that you need to go through, transfer taxes, why does that even exist? So, and so who is responsible for putting those into place? And so I think we need to start banging hands on the table and saying, this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and start removing all of that red tape. Like, we have so much opportunity in construction to just start building, but the government has created so many different layers and processes that you need to go through. There's got to be a way to streamline that. And I think that builders are hurting because of it. I think Canadians are hurting because of it. And so we got to remove all that red tape. Prop tech, I think, can help. Obviously, if you can look at and see there's a technology solution, but policy is a pretty low-hanging fruit there. And that's where, to Janak's point, how do we get them to work together?
So I was in Devon 2 weeks ago and visited our Innotech facilities out there that are doing all sorts of really interesting applied research and testing. So I was talking to a woman who's doing welding research and using new technology to really understand how to increase productivity as it relates to this one area. And what was the number that struck me, and I almost fell off my chair, was that, and I can't remember the length of time, but we're going to be short 51,000 welders in the next number of years. And so, are we going to be able to hire 51,000 welders? No. And so one of the things that they're doing in this one lab in Innovates is looking at how laser welding can replace individuals. And so right now they're able to, in essence, replace 4 welders with 1 using this laser welding technology. And so when we talk about technology and innovation, there is such an important role to play as it relates to the construction industry and as Janak said, the building of things. And so it's really important from my perspective that when we talk about innovation, we don't lose sight of some of the fundamental technologies that really are going to continue to help drive the country and this province forward. And this welding example was one I actually told the minister because it was very illustrative to me and just sort of boom in your face. How are you going to replace 51,000 welders? You're not going to do it through just having more young people in colleges and universities. There's not enough seats to do it, and so technology is the solution.
So robots with lasers.
Yeah.
That is terrifying.
Well, no, right now it's individuals with lasers, so we're not using robots.
Anyone else back here? The question? Yeah, over here.
Hi everyone, thanks for the great panel. Often when we talk about things like challenges in growth and productivity, one of the things that startups, scale-ups will repeat again and again is a difficulty accessing experienced talent. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of young people who are really excited, myself included, but I don't have decades of experience building a company. So what can we do to retain and recruit this kind of experienced talent that will allow our startups, scale-ups, et cetera, to grow?
Yeah, that's an extremely important question because we need to figure out ways of making it easier for people to get going. Because I think that there's like a chicken and egg problem where you basically you need experience to get a job. You can't get a job because you don't have experience. And so I think that's one of the things that I think startups, if we have a more dynamic startup environment where you have more companies competing for talent, by nature you are going to then need to figure out ways of attracting those people into the companies and saying, hey, I would love it if I had an engineer that had 10 years of experience, they're a senior dev now, but because I don't have that option, I have to find someone else. And like we experienced this during COVID. I mean, it was absolutely crazy. I actually just recently saw a chart that showed the number of the demand for engineers during COVID and then how it's changed since then. But the competition at that time was absolutely crazy. So I think if we have a more dynamic market, we have more people competing for those roles, and then I think part of what's going to happen as well with AI is that I think the bar will get lowered. So the barrier to entry will get easier for people to get in. One of the things we're doing right now at NEO is we're bringing in engineers and basically putting them into an incubator to allow them to have kind of a bit more of a sandbox to play in. And then from that group, we then pick the different engineers that we advance onto the next level and try to accelerate it very, very quickly. But by doing this, we're able to lower the barrier to entry and allow more people in with the expectation that, hey, like, it may not work out for everyone, but at least we enable people to compete. At least we're giving people the shot. But it's going to take more than just NEO. It's going to take like 50 to 100 NEOs in order for us to really give people the opportunity that we need.
View of all of the programs that we offer through Alberta Innovates, and it was a very interesting process to really try to understand what things were enablers, what things are really no longer all that helpful, what things should we be doing more related to. The thing that struck me was the extent to which, when we talk to folks in the ecosystem, in startups, and all sort of contexts, The technology development advisors that we have were pointed out as the number one thing that Alberta Innovates provides that is of tremendous advantage to individuals, very much along the lines that you're just talking about. These are senior individuals that have been there, done that, and so one of the things we're going to do is look at how do we double down on those kinds of supports, because there's no question when we talk to folks that are in that phase that you're in, having the sort of senior advisor that can support them in this kind of context makes a lot of sense. And doing it at a point where you can't afford to hire those individuals that frankly can provide that kind of support. And so I think I'll just say that Alberta Innovates is very aware of this as one of the challenges, and we're really going to take a hard look at how we increase the resources in this area to make sure that we can provide those kind of supports.
I'll use moderator privilege and jump in on that, but I think there's an opportunity for fractional work that we haven't seen before. And there's a convergence of having a lot of people who are leaving the workforce, particularly post-COVID. We've seen a really rapid, more quickly than expected, retirement, plus the advent of technology. And so people are able to be more efficient, work less, and actually being valued more for their expertise than for their time. And so I think where you're able to tap into fractional expertise and work with someone for a few hours a week, it helps bring down the cost, and you can use technology tools to be able to leverage the gap in between there.
Are you an engineer looking for work right now? No? Okay. I was going to say, talk to me afterwards.
How do you feel, Ruhee? How much time we got? Can we do like a rapid fire round?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. You're good?
3 questions and then...
Okay, you too, but quick. Quick.
Okay, so Quick is, we are with the Tourism AI Network, a company that makes tourism companies embrace AI. So my question was mostly into the side of like how these new AI technologies, how we can make people use them to improve, to take the risk, to make them take the risk, you know, like to be entrepreneurs and to be into this whole world of like, we are in a stability culture, so let's get out of it, use the new technologies to be into this.
So it's like, how do you get clients, essentially?
No, it's mostly on the side of like pushing people to use these new technologies to be able to take the risk and be an entrepreneur or do different things at their companies with the new technologies.
On the building side, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So to repeat the question, so how do we get more entrepreneurs to use AI in this particular space?
In every space, like just pushing Albertan people or like Canadian people to use more AI technologies or more new technologies to take the risk and avoid the stability.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's happening rapidly already right now. Like we're seeing the adoption of AI faster than maybe any other technology in history. So I don't know if you're going to have to do anything necessarily to accelerate it. I think they're already talking about, like, Janak's here, for God's sake. I mean, we've got someone in government talking about standing up AI teams. We've got government that's hiring engineers for the first time. Like, this is happening whether we want it to happen or not. The question is, are we going to be preeminent in it? Are we going to be leaders in it or followers? Are we going to build in Canada or are we going to take other people's tech? That's really the question, and that's going to come down to people building here.
Gosh, here I go. Do you know who Roger Bannister is? Roger Bannister was the first person to run a 4-minute mile in the world. And people had been trying for decades and decades. And he did it, the first guy. But within 3 weeks of him doing it, 25 other people did it. Now why? What happened? Did he change the speed of, the thickness of the air? Well, no. When people saw it was possible, what they believed to be impossible suddenly became possible. And then 25 other of the top runners just did it. So what's going to make them adopt it? When you kick their butt. Then they'll say, oh shit, and then they'll adopt it. And a little bit of that has to happen when any new technology comes out. And I think we're at the oh shit moment right now.
I could run through a wall. That was great.
So there's been discussions tonight around AI tech collaboration in other countries outperforming Canada in certain areas. And as two students here in SAIT's first FinTech graduating class, I see opportunities for students to study AI in Ireland and bring that knowledge back. However, there seems to be a lack of funding for these exchange programs to support students to go and get that knowledge. What do you think is the reason behind the lack of support for these student programs?
I guess I should have an opinion if I was the president of a university. So one of the big challenges in Canada is we have not placed value on students having outbound experiences. Way back when I was the dean at the University of Alberta, I spent time with a number of deans traveling to Sweden and Norway. And why did we go to Sweden and Norway? Because in Sweden and Norway, every student has an opportunity for an outbound experience. And so, and it's because Sweden and Norway appreciate the extent to which those students then bring back the learnings from all these different countries that they travel to. Now, the good news is that Canada finally, about 4 or 5 years ago, came up with a funding program to support outbound student mobility. But it's not, and it is across the country. In fact, at the University of Lethbridge, we got 2 grants in that area. But it's still a very underfunded area compared to other countries in the world. And so part of it is the advocacy that's needed to help Canadian governments recognize that sending students abroad is as important as attracting students from other countries. And so it's trying to create that balance point between those 2 goals. But I will say I have seen some movement, but not enough, obviously, because you're not seeing the granting opportunities that exist for you. So I do think it's a very important area, though.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much for your questions. I know we've gone a bit over time, so we'll wrap it up here. But I think all of us are sticking around for a little bit. The bar is open, so feel free to, if you didn't get your question answered, come hunt down any of us, and we're happy to chat over a drink. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.